Our first speaker for today is Tony Stubbs. He's an author, he's an editor. He's going to talk about mastery. Let's give him a big applause.
Hey, good morning. We all seem to have survived Halloween. So in order to talk about mastery, we need to know who we are and how we got here to be sitting in this room today. And it's a fascinating story. So settle in. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in fact so long ago that time hadn't even been invented, there was a vast consciousness, really vast. But it was lonely. It had no one to talk to. So it had a brilliant idea. It cloned itself a few hundred billion times and said to each of the clones, I've created this thing called space. I want you to go out there and make me a galaxy, each of you. Different galaxy, get creative. So they did. They went to their appointed area of space, and then they cloned themselves a few hundred billion times and said to each clone, I want you to build me a star system within my galaxy. And one of them decided to build a vast spiral nebula kind of thing that we know as the Milky Way. Well, our particular galaxy builder said to the star builders, build me star systems within my galaxy. So the star creators went out, cloned themselves a few times, and our particular creator, Sol, said to one of the clones called Gaia, you've got the third orbit to build a planet in. Now that's the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, not too cold, it's just right. And it will support life beautifully. So Gaia went ahead, built a really, really beautiful planet. And one day the supreme thinker that thought this entire game into creation stopped by, said, yeah, you've done a nice job. I'm going to give you some souls. So the creator created 60 billion souls. Now that number's important. Also important is that those souls are creator stuff. The same stuff as the supreme creator. So, obviously, you are each one of those 60 billion souls. And then the waiting began. The planet was still hot, molten. So we waited about 4 billion years for the thing to cool down. And in that time, we played a lot of solitaire and free cell. So then finally it gets cool enough to support life. And we watch as other races that started the game a little before we did, they brought in wave after wave of life, and we watched the dinosaurs. And as souls we could play little games and jump into a dinosaur body, but it wasn't much fun. When you weigh 60 tons and you've got a brain the size of a walnut, there's not much you can do. So eventually along came primates, and we looked at Homo erectus. I know it sounds like a horny gay guy, but it just means he stands up, walks around on his 2 legs. Again, not much fun. He's got a brain the size of not much fun. Instinctive creature. Then along came a race of genetic engineers, and they gave us Neanderthal man. That's an improvement, but not much. They're too hairy. Finally, we get Cro-Magnon man. And if there was a Cro-Magnon man sitting in this chair, you couldn't distinguish the two of us. This is a Cro-Magnon body. And it's got the chakra system, the meridian system, that makes it okay as a soul carrier, which means that we can incarnate into them. Now, it's not perfect. They're not telepathic, these bodies. They don't support telepathy, and they don't support flight. So they're adequate for our purposes. So we started to incarnate into these bodies for a few minutes. You know, we'd jump into a couple of bodies, let them have sex and jump out again and say, well, that was fun, wasn't it? Then one of us came up with an idea. Why don't we attach to one of these soul carriers the moment it's born and stick with it until it's no longer viable as a soul carrier? Does that sound like a plan? Yeah. So a bunch of souls, a group decided to try it. And they had two escapes. The first, any time in the first 2 years, you can leave without cause. No questions asked. Just, you think, I made a mistake. I'm not really enjoying this. So you can leave. And we call that sudden infant death syndrome. And then we have, after the age of 2, if you want to leave, you've got to find another soul to swap with. And that's called a walk out, walk in. And as long as you can find another soul who wants to come in, it's cool. You make the switch. And that's what I did at the age of 7. I'm not the original inhabitant of this body. The previous occupant couldn't hack it. He found the world a real scary place. Decided he'd made a mistake. So he left at the age of 7 and I came in. Seemed like a good idea at the time. I inherited his problems though. He was terrified. So, here I am at the age of 7, this brave soul coming in here, and I find this body's full of terror. It took me 7 years to get rid of that. Yeah, I'd go into a candy store, and I'd turn bright red with embarrassment just asking for a piece of candy. Turns out a few years ago, when I lived in Northern California, I was in a place called Lupin. It's a nudist club. I've been a nudist all my life. And they asked me to do a lecture on a Friday night in their metaphysical series. And they did warn me that there'll be textiles in there. That's people who wear clothes. Strange habit. Anyway, comes Friday night, there I am, on the platform, stark naked, with a room full of people wearing clothes. Now, the two biggest human fears are suddenly finding yourself naked in a room full of people who aren't naked, and public speaking. And there I was doing both. The only problem is when you're doing a talk in the nude, where do you clip your microphone? Anyway, I was standing there and I thought back to the little 7-year-old who'd turned bright red just asking for a piece of candy and thought, you've come a long way, baby. So we've got these two escapes, and then eventually the body gets so that it's not a viable soul carrier, and we leave. That's no big deal. We go back home, and that is our true state, back home. These are just little holidays, these earth lives, and going home has no more significance than going home after a vacation. I mean, when I lived in London, there were things I couldn't do in London. So I came out to California for a vacation. I went down to SeaWorld and sat in the front row where it says splash zone. I thought, well, that's no big deal. Wrong. When Shamu does that with his fin, 10 tons of water land on your head. Now, the last time a Londoner was swamped by a killer whale, I can't remember. So, you see, I had to come to California for certain experiences. Then I went to Black's Beach and got pretty badly burnt in very sensitive places. The last time a Londoner got sunburnt was 1875, and it wasn't on a nude beach either. So obviously California is synonymous with coming down to the earth plane for certain experiences. And when you're done with those, it's time to go home. Just like I would go back to London, and I would resume being a creator. Because I created computer systems for the phone company in England. When I came out on vacation, I didn't think about creating computer systems. I forgot entirely. Which brings us to the second thing. When we first started incarnating into these Cro-Magnon type bodies, we discovered it wasn't working. Because we could all remember home so well. And we missed home. We missed being able to jump from place to place just by thinking about it. We missed being able to create beautiful buildings just from our thoughts. So one of our group came up with a bright idea.